Thank you. I apologize for the delay in getting started. We've had some technical difficulties, but I believe they've all been sorted out. Tonight is a workshop for the City Council to review the school committee's version of the latest school budget. With that, Mr. Superintendent Jake Langlace, would you take it away, please?
Am I on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties. My battery on my laptop has slowly dwindled, and I brought a backup that won't connect to the HDMI. So, the late start is on me. I apologize. Hopefully this will work long enough, and if not, Bill can help with a backup from his laptop. So we met recently with you all over at the school committee meeting and just gave you an overview of some things that we anticipated coming along. Our budget process has continued. There's been 2 additional cost centers that were reviewed since we last met with you. And I'm going to tell the end first and then go through some other information. The end is we got insurance update information, which is in a school budget process, always this anomaly of it comes in early to mid-April. We get projections earlier on and we try to build budget around that. This year, the early projection was over 17%, which is a massive increase in healthcare costs for an organization our size. And then a couple weeks ago, we got a number that was a cap of 14. And it was yesterday afternoon. Okay. Yesterday afternoon, we got verified information that Lewiston Public Schools' health insurance increase would be 3.3%. So it was a welcomed sigh of relief that allowed us to quickly, obviously verify, because this is big dollars we're talking about, but also to note that the school committee is going to need some time to work on what they're going to do with those funds. My general sense from the committee is that there's a will to reduce even the 3.44% that's being proposed. To what exact amount or to what things? I think there's a few different ideas that I have that I'll recommend to the school committee, but ultimately they'll have to do that work. I would say I feel confident in the feedback I've gotten from committee members that we will be able to reduce a little bit further in this budget. So we're coming in initially with a approved school committee budget of 3.44%. With this new information, there's an opportunity to reduce it even further. But the school committee hasn't had a chance to weigh in on that in a public session yet because we got information late yesterday and we had a meeting last night. So there'll be some time for both public input and school committee input, and we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So I'm going to just walk through the budget process. I know the city council between last year and this year, and some of you even more than that, are pretty familiar with this format. But just to share publicly, we begin the process obviously in December, and we built our direction for our budget this year, really weighing heavily on a few things. One, we made a significant push, as did our delegates at the state and beyond level, to find ways to ensure Lewiston was getting the maximized amount of subsidy that it should get available within the rules of the existing structures, and also to push on the levers of the existing rules to see if we can improve them to benefit our community. So a lot of work has gone into that. I think some of the direction from you all last year was we need to let our state delegation know that these unfunded mandates, these subsidy values really needed to work better. I think they did that work. I know we have spent a number of days and hours in Augusta talking with the delegate assembly, doing work there. So we're trying to improve the overall revenue stream coming into Lewiston. We came in with a very conservative plan. Usually around December, I ask building principals and area leadership to bring back the things that they think that they need, and I work through that list with my team in and around January, and usually we tell people what we think we can ask for and what we can't. This year in December, I said, if you want something, you have to tell me what you're giving up to pay for it. There was no room to add. Knowing that we had input from our community with 3 referendums last year, we wanted to be mindful of the direction and the will of what I think the community is saying, and also be as conservative as we could with our budget. And I will beg multiple times between now and May 13th to please go vote on May 13th. So step by step, after that December process, January, February, we go through all of our projections, all of our salary scales and adjustments that we need to make. And we call that the superintendent budget. That's what I walk in and share with the school committee. We've shared that binder with all of you. And then the school committee works through their process and they adopt what's called the school committee budget. This year, there were no significant changes of note because it came in pretty lean. And we did have an increase in subsidy, which is helpful to the local effort. The next step, obviously, is with all of you, and we have a presentation tonight, and then on the 6th, we'll be back to present, hopefully for budget passage, and then 1 week later, on the 13th, will be the referendum. And if it passes, May 13th, we have a budget for fiscal year 2026. If it doesn't, we do more work. I always like to mention our themes and goals. We talk about school safety as a big goal, improving our special education structure to improve programming, and also, as you know, our multi-year focus and goals around shifting the dynamic of tuition we pay out so that we can provide a better experience for our kids, but also be fiscally responsible with the funds that we aren't spending to send those same kids elsewhere, including transportation, tuition, and seed reimbursement. Grow pathways to graduation, maintain equity, social, emotional, and coping skills development efforts, improve instruction and learning systematically, and stability and communication. Those are not ranked. Those are all critically important to the work that we do. So some factors that we have shared with you, but also want to share out in this platform. The state of Maine subsidy formula did increase for Lewiston Public Schools this year. We have career and technical education program expanding. And just as a note, and maybe a little public plug, the new programs that exist at Edward Little inside their new high school building are actually our responsibility and our oversight. We do have subsidy for that, but expanding programming has expanded subsidy. And to maximize those funds, we need to use them in that way. If we don't, we'll lose them over a 1.5 to 2 year cycle. We also had a priority this year to reduce the amount of fund balance we're using to start our budget. So we've done that in this budget as well, significantly. And the goal behind that is if we use too much fund balance to start a budget, the day that it's not there, which I project will be 2-3 years max, if we continue on the same pace of using $5 or $6 million, which we did not do this year, we used less, we will face a $3 million shortfall immediately. So that's problematic when we have to ask locally for those additional funds. And again, we have to produce a budget that has community support and one that centers around the needs of our students to do the best we can with the resources we do have. Just as a note, and I know this group knows how hard it's been recently, but over the last 2 years, we have cut 91 positions in our budget process. As you know, many of them, particularly in the first year when we had 61 cuts, were unfilled positions that we just felt like there's a critical mass here that if we reduce it, we know we can't hire all these positions, so we're not going to budget for all of them. Where we landed this year was budgeting the positions that we know we need, and if we cut further, and hiring is getting a little better, but if we cut further, I worry about not having the funding to meet the needs of students. We are having some success with programmatic changes. Our special ed program, which we call CLIMB, is working with very young kids who have significant disabilities, both learning and physical. That's being housed in a hallway at McMahon. We've had to make some structural facility adjustments there, but it's going okay. They're already feeling like they're out of space, which is kind of the problem that we thought we would have, which is, for today's purpose, a good problem to have. I'll talk more about the CLIMB program in Article 2. Like everyone, we have collective bargaining agreements, and those have contractual increases, and we have 2 in negotiation currently, and I know the one who's requested to start. So we'll have 3 different bargaining units out of 7, I believe, that we'll be negotiating over the next several months. Inflation has hit us all. We're aware of there. One of the things we did in this budget was we didn't increase supplies. So we didn't account for inflation in our supplies. We're going to have to figure that out. Healthcare costs, which was a big anomaly, I just explained, so that was good news. We'll make adjustments over the next couple weeks here before our next meeting. Space continues to be a concern. Just some enrollment components to consider. and this is not a political thing, I think when the new administration came in, I anticipated a reduction in new families coming to Lewiston. That has actually not happened. So what we are seeing happening is at least some of families who had settled elsewhere, who might be a greater minority than in Lewiston, are finding their way back to Lewiston where the resources are more centralized. And there have, family networks and folks around them that they can rely on for support. And as you know, there are numerous building projects that have, some of it is a swap out, so older facilities as part of the Healthy Neighborhoods and the HUD grant effort. People are moving out of the older facilities into the new ones, but then we also have many new facilities that are coming online over the next days, weeks, months, and years. I think it's a good economic thing in the grand scheme, but I also am concerned about how we continue to pay for growing enrollments, which is going to require more space physically, more staff, and all the other logistical components with it. We do have some multi-year planning underway, as you know, about 287 Main Street. There was a recent effort to get that building kind of cleaned up. We worked with some local folks to help with that, and also have been in contact with the hospital who sold us because there are some medical items that need to be disposed of, which is their responsibility. So we're working through those pieces. And we've talked about having a walkthrough here soon so that we can invite people to just come take a look and see what that building has to offer. As, again, one option. I continue to work with City Administrator Brian O'Malley on different opportunities with the economic team and trying to figure out what are some possibilities down the road should we reach a spot where we really just need more space to educate our kids. If it's not a renovation at 287, what are some different options? So we continue to talk about that. As you go through the binders that you have, everything from the state accounting perspective is done by articles. That's the term that they use. So everything has specific coding, and it all ties back to what it actually is. And so in these categories, we have these 11 different areas, and those are the articles of the budget. So as you flip through your tabs, those are the core topics in each of those respective areas. So jumping right into Article 1, that's regular instruction. You've seen some of this before, but I again want to share it out publicly and have it there as something people can look up. But you can see the percent change overall in Article 1, which is teachers, ed techs, substitutes, stipends, some other staff. So this is all regular instruction. The percent change of 6.33% and an overall budget increase of just under 2%. That's budget to budget. That's salaries. That's healthcare. That's those kinds of components that are tied specifically to regular educators. This is just a graphic that shows the same information, but in bar graph. And you can see here how there have been some reductions, but for the most part, there are increases, and again, all tied to contracts. Article 2 is special education. It's a big area, obviously, in Lewiston with high levels of need. And here we have some figures. The percent change is 9.49%. With an increase of 2.51. Again, that's the overall. We have that same graphic here that shows the increase. Point of note, when you see these jump, this is the additional staff connected to the climb program. So remember, those staff didn't exist before programmatically, so we've brought them on. And right now we're looking at about a 2 and 4 set of numbers. So we're estimating that it would have cost us about $4 million to tuition these students elsewhere, and we did not have programming for them before this year. And it's costing us around $2 million to provide the appropriate services to those kids. So hard to explain in the context of an overall budget. Is there increased cost? Yes. If we didn't do this, the increased cost would be double. We are hopeful that we can grow that program. We have enough students in need to do so. And the students that we have are very young, and they're going to get older. So we'll have younger students coming in to those levels of need in those programs and looking at expanding upward to meet the needs of the kids as they get older. So the need for expansion is very real. And so we're compromised by space to some extent, but we're doing the best we can with what we have. And we're going to reach a point where we have to do something different space-wise. Last year, we presented this image, and I thought it'd be best to bring it back so we can talk about what we had here. And going from left to right on this screen, on the left, we talk about year one. The middle, we put years 2 and 3, just because we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and make sure we're programming well. And then to the right is year 4, 5. These are targets. We can constantly reflect and do what we can. But the first column there on the left was the target to grow in-house programs by 50 students to a total of 240 students that otherwise would be outplaced. We are hovering around that target right now. We're actually a little below, but I'm going to explain how that's in a good way. We've actually had students return to us in other programming that we've been able to sustain, who have gone from that highly specialized programming to mainstream programming. It's a very calculated series of steps, but this is something we didn't have the capacity to do in the past. So if a kid got tuitioned elsewhere, it was like, okay, what's the next fire that we have to put out? Nobody was really keeping a pulse on whether or not that student was ready to come back, had grown out of some things, had some services that helped them approach school differently. Now we have more capacity to try to get those kids back to us, and that is making a difference. I also want to add, we are exploring, I say this cautiously, but other people tuitioning kids to us. We want to see what that cost structure looks like. So we actually have 2 kids that we're servicing in the Climb program that do not live in Lewiston, and we're seeing some financial benefit to that and also some programmatic benefits for the kid who no longer has to drive an hour to school, but it's more like 10 minutes. Phase 2, or that middle section, just to repeat, there's a cost associated with this. So in that first piece, it says invest $3 million. We're looking more around 2. So less of an increase in investment with some benefits, but you see the target in the middle there of the in-house programs grow to 60 students. And in the graphic above, we tried to circle like a bigger part of the wing. And that is literally just a graphic. It's not McMahon School where this is happening. But one of the challenges right now in McMahon School is they're using the middle chart, in essence. They're using a full wing and a modular to do the work they need to do with students. Actually, three modulars, excuse me, to do the work they need to do with students. So space-wise, this chart wasn't ambitious enough. Savings-wise, it has been. Investment-wise, I think it's about at mark. We're trying to be smart about what we can do, and the only savings to keep us under $3 million is our staffing challenges, which is better in that program, but still has its challenges. If it was fully staffed year-round, we would have consumed the $3 million to run it. Again, looking at that target of continued growth and savings, I think the word I used last year was deflecting cost, because I don't want people to rethink that we're just grabbing money and throwing it in our pockets. These are funds that otherwise we would spend double for kids to go elsewhere. So we spend less to keep them home with all the benefits. And then ultimately, we see that 4 or 5 year target of 28, 29. Does it have its own building? You know, and there's ideas out there of moving some things to 287 Main. Maybe it's this programming, maybe it's other programming because pre-K to 6 is full. Do we do a 6, 7, 8 school? Does that go there? That's a specialized area of programming. Does Dingley become that place? Because it used to be a school and could be again. Those are all ideas. As you know, those cost money and resources are challenging, so we continue to look for ways to fund that with as little impact on local taxpayers as we can. Article 3, I labeled LRTC. That's the Technical Center. Those are our CTE, Career and Technical Education programs. Again, we have students now at 4 different sites. It's really 3, but I call the Green Ladle its own site because it is a separate building. So you have the Green Ladle, you have Lewiston Regional Technical Center programs connected to the high school. We have the EL campus, and we now have multiple programs where we bring kids over daily to Central Maine Community College. So they're participating actively in dual enrollment college credit bearing courses over there. And that's a model that seems to have some pretty good legs under it. So 4 different sites at this point that we oversee. It's going really well. And you see some pretty big percent changes. Overall, you see 13.89 and a percent increase to the overall budget of 0.56. That's anchored in new programming coming online. And with new programming, there is more subsidy. So the budget's gone up, but as far as how it's being paid for, there's 2 key mechanisms. One is increase in state subsidy and revenue. The other is we have worked with area schools in our region, and their school committees have agreed, it's part of their budget process, that we are going to use a metric over a 2-year average for number of seats they get. And anything over Lewiston's budget, they're going to pay their percentage to offset that increase here locally. That's new this year. It's something we've spent multiple years to build, but we didn't feel like it was right long-term that Lewiston carried the bulk of that bill, and other schools had the benefit but didn't have the same cost structure. So they've all agreed, and the percentage is a logical metric. Again, it's an average of 2 years, so it's not a surprise or a shock to anyone, but it fits. And this year we looked at, it was not a huge amount because of the subsidy that came in, but every school said, yep, we'll put it in our budget and we'll get it to you. So again, trying to work those efforts to continue to reduce the burden on us, but also provide the best programming we can with the resources. Again, this is a chart just to explain the same information in the table. Article 4 is other instruction, and these are activities that add to the educational experience of students, but they're not accounted for the same as, say, personnel or, the other articles like direct instruction. Key pieces here: contractual increases in insurance costs. And when you see terms like ESD and ESY, that's the extended school day, so any after-school programming that we offer. ESY is extended school year. That's a nice way of saying summer. So you can see some changes in there. And when we talked prior about after-school and summer programming, we've also talked about how we have woven or braided other grants like 21st Century into our effort. And so with pieces here that require matching there and how we weave it together allows us to provide some good programming and save some funds. But if we don't have certain funds, we can't match the requirements of the grant. And I always worry about things being in jeopardy. If we can't meet the criteria of pieces of the requirements of 21st Century grant, we can't run the program at all. And we can talk more about that in detail if you like. There is an opportunity this year for Title I reallocation funds, so we are applying for a grant for that through the state of Maine. However, anything funding right now connected to title, connected to federal, is a real question mark. So we try to budget in a way that we can run some programming on a minimal level. We're hopeful to get additional 21st Century grants. I always want to say Century 21, which is a real estate company, and I apologize. We're hopeful to get additional grants to help offset local costs there. And again, just the chart to show you the differences. The big transportation jump in other instruction has been the way we have strategically tried to match our local requirement with funding. So transportation costs got shifted. It helps us there because of growing wages in the contracts. So there's some increases there, but the grant can't hold all of it, so we had to move some things to make sure we could do all the above. Article 5 is student and staff support. These are services, guidance, health, our school resource officers. We have our different health coordinator positions, library, instructional technology, student assessments, all of those things. And when you think assessments, in part, that's also credentialing, that's advanced placement testing, those kinds of things. And here you can see our percent change, around 6%, and again, heavy on contract, and an overall percent increase on the budget of 0.36. There's a chart, again, showing the same information. Article 6 is system administration. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. It's contractual increases, insurance costs. And also, just as a note, that includes my office and my team, school committee, which doesn't get paid enough for the work they do, clerical staff, our HR department, things like that. Here's the chart of that. You can see the percent change. These are not massive adjustments. It's a $70,000 difference, 2.5%. Chart that shows the same. Article 7 is school administration, and that's the directing,
Principals.
yeah, principals and directors and assistant principals. contracts, insurance. You see the percent change at 3.61%. Most of that's contract. And again, the healthcare piece. Article 8, student transportation. We do have an increase there, and also fuel cost is something that is part of our contract. And so you'll see increases there. And that percent change is $606,000. We are in one of the last years of our contract with Hudson Bus Lines, and we are looking for anyone out there who might consider putting in for that. We're looking for some bids on our next bus contract or agreement. And busing has gotten better, but still been a challenge. We're still up every morning to see what's going to run, what's not, what we need to move, what we don't, and then communicating with the community. And personally, I would love to not have to get up at 5 a.m. every day to do that. I'd be up at 5 anyway, but I wouldn't have to be doing that. So you can see a pretty big percent change there, but again, a lot of that is connected to the contract and shifting costs. Article 9 is facilities maintenance. We do have some contractual changes there. We have some building-based projects. There are some things in here that, at least over my tenure, we've tried to move some things out of LCIP and make it part of our operations. And so you'll see those building-based projects in here that might have in the past been LCIP. We do still have a LCIP request, as you know. We also had an increase this year in building insurance, which it roots itself in Article 9. And of course, there's inflation, utilities, and how it gets added in. You can see an increase there from last year to this year of $581,000. When it comes to overall supplies and things like that, there's some things we can't avoid. Increase in utility costs and things like that are just things that we have to include. And some of the other projects we did. And you can see if you look at the difference in utilities of a $15,000 savings that was based on actuals connected to heating, gas, oil. We have a rate that's locked in, and the actual was down, so we're praying for a warm winter next year. Also see in this area too that debt service lives there, and debt service is always part of this conversation, whether it's locally approved budget items like expansion of a high school or state projects that we have a percentage that we take on connected to debt service, but also when we have LCIP items approved, they land in our budget, we pay that mortgage bill. So it's one of those delicate matters of you have a threshold that you have to monitor, we have a threshold that we have to monitor because that bill gets paid through the school department's budget. Article 10, debt service and some other items. It's down due to timing of other kinds of debt service, and it's down about 6.88%. Article 11 is all other, and it's up $5,000 due to some cost increases, and this is where our crossing guard invoicing lives because schools cannot employ crossing guards by statute, but others can employ them and bill us for the service, and so that's what lives in Article 11. Outside of the initial articles are adult education. They had some increases. They also had a $34,000 loss of subsidy. Director Gentiner did some good work with any unspent funds and grant efforts and reducing some positions a bit. And she believes she can still provide good service, but they were able to come in with no increase on the budget. So the total current budget is $117,177,091. It's a 3.44% request locally. Again, with that caveat that I'll mention in the next slide about a reduction in healthcare. There's just some numbers here about the increase in our budget drivers. The salary increased by 9%, or $5.4 million. But that includes the additional positions for the climate program that again deflected another $2 million that we would have otherwise had to have spent. So the school committee voted recently to approve the local mill rate increase of 3.44%. But as we started with the end and want to go back there, We believe that with the 3.3% information on insurance, that in another conversation with the school committee, we anticipate between $200,000 and $400,000 will come off of this budget. That's my anticipation, just having had lots of conversations with the committee over the last 6 weeks or so about budget specifically. I do think that there's an interest there in reducing further with the savings from the health costs. We're trying to be mindful of other unpredictable items in the world today as it relates to federal funding, legal matters, you name it. So we anticipate additional reductions, and we'll have that answer for you probably the night of the 28th. The school committee meets. That's when I anticipate they'll vote on any adjustments with those lower insurance numbers. And just so you have a reference, we budgeted at 10% for insurance, and so when it comes in at 3.33, that's a sizable shift. That's where you get the $200,000 to $400,000. The savings, I think, is more than that. What we know is a little more than that, but it's actually, we anticipate it's $865,000 is the difference between 10% and the 3.3. The question is what the committee will want to do with some things that some people really want to make sure we had more room in the budget that we don't. So they'll do that work, and then we'll bring it back to you on the 6th of May. But we would love your questions and feedback about where we came in and thoughts.
Thank you, Superintendent Langley, and thank you to the school committee. You have done a yeoman's work here. My reading of this is that the school committee has taken nearly $900,000 from the superintendent's budget. So kudos to you there. On the other hand, as you know, last year I argued that the school budget was insufficient. We cannot attract the type of individual to Lewiston that we would like to if we have an underfunded school system. It's a delicate balance, mindful of the pocketbooks of the taxpayer, but also looking at the future of the city. So that's a line we have to walk. Councilors have questions. Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Councilor. I have 3 quick ones. What is your current fund balance, and how much of it are you using?
So because my computer's acting up, Bill's going to pull that up for me.
So,
6.7 million is the unassigned as of 6/30.
so 6.7 million is the unassigned, and then the current amount that we're using for this budget is 3.45.
Great, thank you. You said you had 3 bargaining units that you're going to be dealing with. How many employees does that actually account for?
For those, it would be about 250 employees.
Okay, significant. And can someone explain teacher stipends as it went up everywhere?
Yeah. So part of the teachers' negotiations was accounting for those teacher stipends. It's also, some of that is recording it kind of correctly as corrections, so those hadn't been updated. When we do salary scales, those get put on to actual people's salaries, but the stipends are kind of individual things, so they wouldn't get the steps. So that was part of it as well that brought that up.
So a stipend is just basically a pay increase? It's not a bonus
It's not a pay increase. It's for additional work onto their, teaching duties. So they may be part of a leadership group, or they may be part of a student-facing program that happens after school, things like that.
Advisors, coaches, those are all stipend rules.
Great, that's all I have. Thank you. And it's a good budget. I like it.
Other questions from the council? Councilman Najin.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate that the impact of the school budget is not as drastic as it was last year, and I know it's been a challenge. So I appreciate the work that you all have done, as well as the school committee. I do have a couple of questions about, so when I read through here, I noticed that there's some increases in regular education for substitutes, and is that based on not filling those positions last year, or like what is the mathematics that makes such an increase for Article 1?
It's a great question. So it's like an onion without it's got some layers to it. First layer is just vacancies. So when we don't have a 4th grade teacher or an applicant for one, which is not just a Lewiston issue, it's a shortage nationwide. But maybe people who are not working in other capacities will hear this message that we'd love to have them in education and explore their interest in it. Selfless plug. So the shortage creates a need for coverage, and that's where substitutes come in. We've also found some people in our pipeline that we're doing work with this apprenticeship programs and other college opportunities at low or no cost to Lewiston Public Schools to get people trained toward being highly qualified certified educators. And we're finding some substitutes are interested in this, and they're taking long-term sub positions. And to attract people to these daily and long-term building sub positions, we have compensated them a little more to compete in the market. So really it's about coverages. And so when we have people out or missing or it's vacant, we work to cover those positions where we have to. The other thing that's compounding this is getting prepared for things that are coming up, like medical leaves, things of that nature. So those are really based on actuals when we have this level of vacancies. And right now, Bill looked at this afternoon, it was 59 ed tech openings and 37 teacher openings currently. That's today. Some of those are anticipated positions. This is the kind of the hiring season right now. So we're gearing up for summer climb programming because that's year round, and also programming in the fall. So to get people on board and trained and all those things, hopeful for a budget May 13th. That's how some of that cost structure plays out.
Okay, and so when we budget for a salaried position, for a teacher position, if that money is not spent in that fiscal year, does that then go into your fund balance, or does that sit aside in an account for the teaching position?
Yeah, so any funds in our approved budget that goes unused goes directly to fund balance.
Goes directly back in.
Yep.
And that's why we keep seeing a major increase in the fund balance every year, because ultimately we're not filling certain positions we budgeted for. Is that when I say a major increase, it's just the fund hasn't really been expended, and it's always a little bigger than I think we thought it was. And does that come down to the fact that we're not able to fill those teaching positions?
So unfilled positions definitely contributes to the unused funds, the unassigned funds as a fund balance. I will say, though, that over the last couple of years, we've reduced so many of those positions that carryover piece is diminishing pretty quickly.
Okay. The other so in certain sections, you have other staff with some pretty big increases, like LRTC has like 21% increase. There was, I believe, Article 4 or 5 had a similar one as well. Maybe it was Article 5. I'm just wondering what those other positions are.
So the other staff at LRTC, I can speak to that one. I don't know if Bill has thoughts on others, but we're connected to a student services position because we are moving kids through 4 different campuses from 6 different schools, but also facilitating their post-secondary plans and all of that. So the subsidy helps cover a good portion of that, and then there's so that you see the increase, but there's also the revenue piece that covers pieces of that, large in part.
Yeah, that kind of explains the LRTC one. The other big one that you probably saw was in Article 2, Special Ed, Other Staff. That is directly attributed to the CLIMB program. So they are not coded as teachers and ed techs and other director positions in there. Their coding is with other staff. So that was the major increase in Article 2.
So you've set aside that $2 million basically in other staff on that section, correct?
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is that the outsourcing costs, out-of-district costs, still remain the same. So I'm just wondering why that is.
Because we continue to have new enrollments come in that also require needs. Another thing that we're seeing, and I don't know how to curb this, is families moving to Lewiston or to facilities that are in Lewiston that already have out-of-district placements established. So we inherit them in out-of-district placements. And when a student has that level of care provided as part of their education plan, you can't just undo it. So we work to make sure that they should be there and all of those pieces. But we've had, I forget the number, it's upwards of 20 students move to Lewiston this school year that have come in with an existing out-of-district placement in their IEP.
And so it's our responsibility to get them,
As soon as they move here, it's 100% our responsibility.
okay. And
Just the other thing too to be aware of with the climb is many of those students were pre-K coming into K who were going to be outplaced. Like as soon as they hit our door, they were going to be outplaced. So, kind of part of the philosophy of it is if we can start students earlier, then we can start to look at IEPs as students develop and then continue to put them in the least restrictive environment. So all of those climb students likely would have been outplaced.
Gotcha. One of the things that I just want to kind of get your feel for this, I know there's some lawsuits going on right now, Title IX, Title X. I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that comes
Title
up.
VI, yeah.
So my question is, do we have kind of a fallback plan for, like, are we setting aside funds to make sure that, like, our staff is covered, right? Versus keeping, is it kind of like are we hoping for the best? Like, what's the scenario in case funding is held up, during the year? What happens in that case? Do we use our fund balance? Do we borrow? Do we cut? What happens?
D, all the above. So we're trying to work off of facts, because I know there's a lot of big feelings everywhere on both sides of that aisle. We have not heard anything about a reduction in title funds. Lewiston is a large receiver of title funds. We also have a lot of positions in title funds. So underneath that umbrella of nothing has been said about removing title funds, we're staying the course. We've had to have some contingency conversations, like if everyone had to pay for lunch tomorrow, what would that look like? Because right now, everyone in Lewiston, underneath our high poverty rate, gets free breakfast, free lunch if they choose. We estimate lunches would cost $6 instantly if that funding all dissolved. We work off of a specific federal reimbursement model, so that's one of those areas that we are thinking. But from a financial perspective, we have no contingency for that. That would be millions and millions of dollars, and we have no way, and we have no mechanism unless we want to raise it locally to provide lunches and breakfast for kids, other than they have to pay. That's not happening yet, but we've had to do things like talk to Alyssa Roman, our nutrition director, and say, what things do you have in place now, from cash register to cash drawers to, using a card, what have you, at the upper levels, just to how quickly could we turn around if we had to do that? So we're thinking along those lines. Other forms of funding have had an impact but not changed what we provide. One example is this latest piece with the USDA funding that's kind of gone back and forth and is now in litigation. We did take a hit on some of that, but what it was the way in which we use those funds under a grant was to buy local produce and local products. And so our nutrition team is able to find comparable, not local things to still provide something. But we don't have the funds to buy the local things that are sometimes more expensive because they're organic or they're, higher cost. So that's a piece. The other contingencies, though, for things like big grants, like we have a grant for some safety efforts that's got federal funds tied to it. We're proceeding as though those funds are going to show up, but we're being very cautious and watching the messaging around it. But the reality is, if those funds get seized or taken back, whether it's not yet started or in progress, we're going to lose money because we've invested hundreds of hours in planning and coordinating and vendor work and quotes and all of those things. It would just come to a screeching halt. That's just the reality. And some other schools have had that happen with different kinds of funding. Big news this week in education world was the ESSER funds that were extended. I want to thank, behind me, Karen, our assistant superintendent, and her team for doing an amazing job with the ESSER funds, because we spent hours at the deadline appropriately and invoiced as we should have. But there are schools out there doing massive HVAC projects right now, and their funding turned off this week. Money gone. And they have no mechanism to do that work. So we're being very cautious with some of these kinds of projects that are federally funded. But kind of a long answer because there's so much going on, but at the end of the day, we do not have a financial contingency for something that just gets shut off that needs to be done, or jobs that need to be, we try to keep.
Okay. Thank you. ultimately, I think the budget increase is modest and needed, and I appreciate, again, the work that was done in order to get to this point. Obviously, further reductions would be great, but, you know, I was really hoping that we could go into this year with like a net neutral budget, but we haven't actually seen any revenue increases. So I think it's going to be very hard to do that, especially steps and colas on the city side as well. The portion of the overall budget, the dollar amount for the school budget at this moment, do you have that? What the taxpayer liability is?
For the local
Yeah,
portion?
for the local portion.
Bill has the revenue sheet. Just the local is,
The total local amount, $31,382,997. And then projected mill rate increase of 46 cents, which would be 3.44%.
and that's prior to what we think will be a reduction.
The reductions on the
Coming up soon.
insurance as well as
Yeah.
possibly something else. From what I understand, you had said the school committee was looking at other
That would be the
pieces.
insurance.
Oh, they're just
Yeah.
the
The
insurance?
insurance
Okay.
adjustment. But to give you a number to think of in your mind, if the school committee were to reduce by, say, somewhere around half of that savings, because there were some other things that some wanted in the budget. If we did 400,000, we just brought this as a just in case, it could go down to 2.15% or 29 cents on the mill rate, if that's the number the school committee settles on. I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not nervous about some things like negotiations, like more positions being filled, which leaves us no room for error.
Well, and what you brought up about federal funding as well. So.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Sol.
I don't have very many because Councilor Najin literally asked every one of my questions. So, I guess I can ask a couple of clarifying questions. I think I heard you, did you say that you did not budget for supplies?
We budgeted for supplies, but we did not budget any increase based on inflation
Okay.
or additional items.
And the Klein program, they're operating in a hallway?
So they have a hallway or wing at McMahon, and just off of that wing, there are 3 modulars that they also use.
Oh, okay. All right.
I caught the hallway comment too, and I almost said
I-
it's a wing
That's what I
with,
thought.
with some very nice bathrooms, I might add.
So during your budget, I think I heard you say one of your meetings that you were holding $165,000 aside for your special ed program, and that was contingent on the insurance number that came back. Did I hear that correctly?
So you talking about a prior meeting?
Yeah,
So
I
what
think it was the night you voted.
Yeah, so what happened is, if I'm remembering the piece correctly, we do reimbursements. So the services that we provide, some of that is billable in multiple different pathways. And so the billable items have come back as we're projecting, so we gotta live in the actual and not in the hopeful. And some of the actuals are ticking up because of the time frame on return. But also we found some areas that we can back bill for additional rates. And when that was approved by the state, we had to wait for their approval, but when it was approved by the state, we could insert that money into the budget as revenue, which reduces the costs here locally.
Okay. And I think, how many special ed children have you been able to keep here in Lewiston compared to last year?
Newly?
Yeah.
So every kid in the Klein program, so that's
20 plus, yeah.
23, I think, last I knew.
Yeah.
And again, 2 of those are from another district as we try that model. We want to get that number closer to 40. We've had, I'm estimating here, probably about a dozen kids come back from out-of-district placements. So our target of 50 is a metric we keep an eye on, and we're real close to 50. And I believe if we count the handful of kids that have gone back to mainstream from other placements, we are actually at or above 50, which was our goal this year.
Well done. So, yeah, I guess if that insurance coming back at the 3 point, that's big. That's really big. And it would be wonderful if you were able to drop that mill rate
Yeah.
coming at us a little bit with that. But There's no new positions?
The only thing in this that lives as new is these efforts around special education.
And LRTC.
Which I
as
totally
it-
support.
And the technical center, which has subsidy backing it.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Councilor Roy?
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of quick comments, only because every one of the questions I have on my sheet, you just asked the last two that I had. Thank you. Yeah, I know it is. But anyways, I just want to say I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Up until last year, when I first came into budget season, I didn't really know how much hard work goes into cutting positions that you really need and you really think you want to have filled. And to keep it down as much as you have this year with what you have is really an amazing job. So I just want to say that. And I would love to see the climb program just continue to climb. I mean, I think that is just really amazing, right? And the more, I think, we may not see it this year or next year, but I think the longer that goes, the more money overall in the years to come we're going to save. So I really appreciate your efforts into that too. So just want to say thank you to every one of you. All right, appreciate that.
Just as a fun visual connected to the climb program, when things first started, we had some construction going on. That's why Bill says bathrooms with a big smile on his face, because he helped facilitate that project in a window that I made too short, but it needed to happen. And so to move kids around the construction, they got these little plastic wagons that kids sit in. They have a seat in them, and it's turned into them using that when they have their snacks. So think of kids who have learning disabilities and physical disabilities getting in that wagon and going for their walk in the hall and just being as happy as could be. It's if you need to brighten your day, go stop over at McMahon and just watch those kids hit the hall, and they just love it. And it's, to me, that's the magic in the work that's happening, and it just feels good. So not only are we saving some funds from our local tax base, but the kids are truly getting the experience we hoped they would have. And the wagons is kind of a happy consequence or coincidence of the construction project, and it's something that now they're talking about different kinds of wagons and like a plastic train-like wagon assembly, because the kids just love the wagons.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Councilor Gwinnett?
Thank you, Council. I have one more dealing with food and meals, because I didn't get to hear that presentation. And it's I have a grave concern because kids need to eat. You know, that's a big bother for me. I guess my question would be is if we do lose that funding, are we going to ditch the federal and state requirements, seeing how they're not giving us money, and make sure the kids eat something? Bananas, fruit. You know, if you have to follow their regime, you're right, you'll be millions of dollars in a hole. But you can feed children today good food that'll sustain them for school purposes without going through the hoops that's been presented to you all. I'd hope that you at least will look at that as an option. There's nothing wrong with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and hot dogs and macaroni and cheese and things you can get at a decent price. So I would offer that as a tidbit. I'm sure you're all going to look into that, but I just don't think we should be following rules if they're not going to pony up and give us the money required.
Yeah, I think we'll try to do things as healthy as we reasonably can, but the statement's already been made in my office by several of us that if the federal funds go away, the regulations will too. We'll do what we can to feed our kids, but there are some regulations in place now that I personally struggle with. Again, it's not a political thing, but when we're giving kids a side of something that no one's going to eat, I don't know why we do that. But it's really to check a box to meet a criteria, because there needs to be 2 more grams of protein in a meal, which I think is important, but this could be a long conversation. I think, yes, some of the regulation would go right out the window if the funding also stopped.
Thank you.
I'd love to see a shift in both. I'd love to see the regulation back off on the nutrition requirements for a meal to be reimbursable and maintain the funding to support kids who don't have the resources to eat.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a few myself, so you've already had a shot. Councilor Najin. I noticed that ed techs are down, and at least in Article 1. Is that because of class size, or are these positions that are being cut? Why are we saving $220,000?
That was position reductions. We had some redundant positions in there. So there was a little bit that got carried in there that wasn't a position because it was vacant when it went in. As we go through the budget, we have our principals go through and match things, and so that was really a correction of these positions. And some of them had been vacant for a couple of years, so that we decided that we were going to pull them out.
Okay, because I realize that ed techs are a crucial component of the entire system, and with larger class sizes, and one of the questions I have is, do you have average class sizes by tranche, by school, by grade?
We have average class sizes by school, by grade, by class.
Okay.
And we watch them regularly because of our enrollments being so high. And we've had to put in some kind of unwritten protocols. Some kids are going to schools that are not in their home district because school's full in that particular grade. So some kids are going to school elsewhere. We just have to.
Do you have a cap or a maximum number of students per teacher in a classroom?
So there's a state statute for some of the younger kids, but when you get into upper elementary, middle, and high, there's no rule on a specific number. We do work closely with the association about monitoring those numbers so that we don't have people taking on excessive amounts of students that create a harsh burden. But we have had a couple of different conversations this year at different points talking about, do we need additional teaching staff? And we did at one point in our multilingual programs. We get, at times, what we call hardship funds to help with that from the state. So we don't do that without some funds, but the funds aren't always enough. And so we monitor the classroom ratios because we are reaching thresholds where we're sending kids that are new to us to schools other than where they should go based on where they live. We're also keeping a close eye on these developments. So for instance, right over, well, I'm pointing to my left, but on TV it doesn't matter. In our downtown neighborhoods here, where we have some new buildings that are done or nearly done, many of those pickups land in the same two schools that are also looking at high numbers. So it depends on the grade, it depends on the family and where they land, but I think a districting conversation may be on the horizon in Lewiston. When we look at all these new developments, we're going to need to look at what portions of our community go to which schools. And I don't want to dive into a too long a conversation about it, but we may also have to look at some reorganization of schools and maybe focusing resources like this school is pre-K to 2, this school is 3 and 4, this school is 5 and 6, or 6, 7, 8, that kind of model. There'll be some cost of that kind of shift, and logistically you have to bus all over the city. But if our enrollment continues to grow, we do not have the facilities. If 287 came online, it would help, but we can't grow much more without not having the facilities to have lunches. It's not just classroom space and teacher ratio, it's the whole thing. We can't have an assembly because the kids don't fit in the gym. If you add more lunch seatings, you got to figure out coverages. We're pushing.
Okay, thank you. I'm certainly.
I do want to add about the ed tech thing, because I'm looking at my notes here. We did reallocate some positions too. So there was a position that was reallocated to LRTC. They had reallocated a position that should have been out of their grants that they received. So there was some reallocation of positions, and then the other reallocations were based on looking at the job description, and they weren't ed tech positions. So if you were look historically over this, especially in regular ed, at one point we had all of our language facilitators coded as ed techs, and then realized that those shouldn't have been coded as ed techs, so it was a significant shift. So this is kind of part of cleaning that up too.
Okay, thank you. So this is definitely not a reduction in staffing of ed techs or a conversion of ed techs to other positions, but rather an accounting?
Some reallocation, and if their job position wasn't an ed tech
Right.
for code wise, then they went to those other staff positions.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you. I want to highlight the Climb program and your success in that. You had a graphic here that talked about expenditures, and I think you would be well advised to say these are also the deferred costs. I think I heard you say that we're saving for a $2 million expenditure. If we didn't have this program, it would be $4 million. That number is very helpful because that's an avoided cost of $2 million. People look at a $2 million inflation on this, but they don't realize that there's a $4 million reduction. So that would work very, very heavily in your favor to emphasize that, I think. The other question I have is mundane. You noticed that you indicated that fuel and transportation is one of the drivers for increased cost. We just got some good news on the city side. Forgive my ignorance, does Hudson still provide as a contract service to you? Does that contract include them supplying their own fuel, or do they fuel at the,
They fuel at our station, so we got the good news too.
and that's included in this budget?
Yep.
And yet it's still going up?
Yes, so the two key factors, at least how I see it. One is our contract in this particular year has a jump in it. It's just the way the contract was built, so that's just a straight cost as part of the contract. And the second one is the number of students that are identified as homeless or out of district. We have had to contract out additional subcontractors, if you will, because Hudson cannot provide the volume of transportation that we need. They don't have enough drivers. And also, we're at a point where we've exceeded the contract that was built many years ago. And so the additional costs are kind of outside of Hudson and that fuel.
Well, if you do look in Article 8, though, you'll see that the fuel costs did come down by 6%.
Okay, all right. You cited that as a driver of increased costs in Article 8. Or maybe you didn't. You just simply said fuel costs, and I inferred that it was an increase because everything else is increased.
Because everything else is an
Right, right.
increase kind of a thing. But yeah, we got some of those positives. Also in Article 9, we talk about energy costs, and you'll see that energy utilities, because we kind of just put them all together.
Yes.
Was a minimal decrease of 1%, not even a percent on the overall budget. But we had some things go up. Actually, our electric went up. Yours, I believe, is going to be going down next year. But we also had some other savings, and we were also trying to say, okay, what was our 3-year average, and bring some of those in line. So it kind of netted out to that 0, really.
Okay, all right. Well, $15,000 is 3/4 cent on the mill rate.
There we go.
So bear that in mind. Let me see, I think one other question, but while I look that up, Josh, Councilor Najin, I think, had his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. So you'd mentioned out-of-district transportation costs for unhomed students. That's not billed to McKinney-Vento? Or there's overages past what the assigned?
Many overages. So McKinney-Vento issues an amount of funds, and we're a receiver, but the amount of transportation connected to McKinney-Vento far exceeds the resource provided through the McKinney-Vento grant. Far exceeds.
And yet, that's sticky, because ultimately we're required to
That's correct.
transport students that are unhomed within the district. And if the cost exceeds that, that seems like there's a balance there that's not right.
I would equate it to the special education component. So when a kid moves here and they have an out-of-district placement, we own it, and it's legally binding. I would also just note that it's not just kids who are coming to school here. We could have kids who have been displaced to Lewiston for a hotel or a shelter of some sort, and they get bused to, we've gone as far as Augusta, J-Main, far south as, I think, Saco. So if the student has if they qualify, they have a right to remain in their school. It goes the other way too. We have some folks that they've landed themselves in Saco somehow, and the busing cost exists. And usually with districts that we work with, we split it. But it's on the two of us to figure out how it's going to happen.
Wow.
Which has also led to some of these external contracts outside of Hudson, because they don't have another van to drive to Jay or what have you.
So just real quick, I want to acknowledge that the LRTC expansion, I think that's positive, very, very positive for the community. I also think that the work that you all did with the delegation in order to make sure that we got a decent reimbursement for the conditions that we actually are seeing is fantastic. And the, kind of the smart billing and reimbursement processes that we do are excellent, including allowing students from other school districts to attend the CLIMB program as we build that. I kind of see, hopefully in the future, some type of metric where we're looking at that climb program to say, this is how many students we've taken from specialized education into regular education. This is how many students we've pulled back into the school district instead of going to other school districts. This is how many students we're servicing from other places. Because I think ultimately if we build out that programming, we'll become known as a community for those specialists to work in. And so I think that's really valuable. And I just also wanted to acknowledge too that like at some point like metrics are big pieces, right? And so like if we get like reports back on our graduation rates, right? And we're focusing on trying to increase those graduation rates, and then also placement post-graduation, like just having some data that we can follow on a year-by-year basis on that, and maybe staff retention as well. I think that's probably another key metric in order to determine how healthy the school system is, because we know that folks get to choose to test out, right? And so our tests are not always fair, and then also a good metric for how well the school system is doing. And so I'm just naming those pieces as like, whatever metric we're looking at, it's something that we could look at year to year to year and say, are we improving? Are we showing, that these investments are bearing fruit? So, but that's it. Thanks a lot.
Councilor Roy?
Thank you. One last question from me. Can you remind us and everybody who may be listening out there, if we have constituents who email us after this tonight, what is the time frame to getting our questions and all that stuff back to you, and then for you to come back to us? What do we have for a time frame?
I mean, I'm trying to be pretty quick, usually when there's questions around the budget, especially this time of year. Much of it is in here anyway.
Right.
So, but yeah, we try to get back to people pretty quick.
Okay, so as far as that goes, if we get some between now and we'll say Friday, and we get you the questions, like how, like, all I'm just saying is, would it be in time for you to maybe consider it, to make changes if that's the case? I mean, do we still have time to do that, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I think if people want to make recommendations about changes in the budget, I'm happy to take those. I think sooner is better.
Okay.
The school committee will meet on the 28th. The agenda and the details to potential shifts will be available then. When that agenda goes out, so the prior Thursday, so you're looking at the week of the break, which is a week after this coming. So I would say there's 5-6 days here to throw some input into the pot, but I would also say on the 28th, anyone could attend the public session with the school committee to chime in. That's 5:30 at the Green Ladle on Monday the 28th. So, yeah, so if you're talking about adjustments, yeah, I would say try to get those recommendations in sooner so that we can consider all the different variables, but ultimately the school committee will make that decision on the 28th.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for everybody listening at home, please email us with all your questions, comments, concerns, and we'll try to get them out to the superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Roy. Any other questions from the council? I just want to ask for the populations of special education. It seems to me, and my memory is growing foggier with the passing years, but we were talking about 71 students that were tuitioned out last year. Does that sound reasonable?
So last year, I think we were at 130.
So was our goal 71, or?
So our goal was to program for 50 more in-house, because we have no way of knowing the metric of what might come in.
Right.
Well, we have some predictive measures, but through CDS and things like that, but we don't have a known. So I think as we go, we want to add another, I think in year 2, we looked at a 75 student number, so another 25 kids. And we teased a little bit with that second phase because we know we don't have the space. So that next jump is going to really hinge on, do we have a physical plant to do it?
That was going to be my next question. So did I hear you correctly that 20 students have been brought into the system this year from tuition programs last year?
So between a combination of kids who have returned and kids who would have been outplaced, so things like a kindergartner might be coming into the system who would have been outplaced based on their needs, that we've taken them right into these younger programs. So part of the expansion model is intent in that these younger kids are familiar with our programming. They know what we have to offer. They know our staff. They know our people to communicate with. They know the routines and I'll pick up, drop off. Those things that are really important, especially with kids that have high needs and their families. So, but those kids are going to turn 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're going to continue to have levels of need. So part of that expansion model will exist because we'll continue to have kids come to us that have that level of need. And 2 years out, part of why we're looking at the tuition-based piece is the intent for the state to roll CDS students, which are younger than pre-K, onto local school districts. Right now, the state tries to manage that. I think they're doing the best they can. It's not going great. But I think we're going to be responsible for those students. So we're trying to gear up this regionalization type approach of if we tuition some, how much can we put in the coffers to maybe renovate a floor, maybe, those kinds of things. And it's that delicate balance of how big can you get before you need the thing. And right now we're starting to push those threads of getting big. Can't add too many more without having not enough room for staff and programming, but also looking at that regionalization approach. It is feasible. It has happened elsewhere. We're not there yet, but we also estimate that between CDS and folks moving to our community, we could see in a 2-year swing up to 200 additional students that have high need.
Wow. Well, I guess the good news is we're going in the right direction. And there has been money saved this year, and kids are being brought home, so they're not having to bus for an hour and a half. And I like very much the concept of creating a center here in Lewiston where we could begin to take tuition students in. That would be beneficial in so many ways. So kudos to all of you who have worked on that. Thank you. It's a work in progress, but we're headed in the right direction, and I'm very encouraged by that. Thank you. Councilor Sol?
I just had one last question. I promise it will be, well, depending on your answer. Not that I ever want any child to be turned away from a school. Do you have a limit? I mean, there must be, you can only fit so many. And I know you would go and purchase more space, but if you don't have the means to do that, what do you do?
So we are legally obligated, and if we can't provide the service for students, we will end up in litigation, and it will cost us far more than any of those renovations would cost.
But when you physically don't have the space.
Not an option. We just have to do it. It's almost like if we didn't do the climb program this year, I would be here with my eyes wide saying we had to spend $4 million this year.
Yeah.
And $2 million of it was unanticipated, and we don't have anywhere to pull that money from. So it's...
Well, I fully support that program.
Yeah,
and I support all children going to school.
Absolutely.
It's just,
it's a good question, though,
it's,
because and it's not just high needs kids, it's all kids.
Yeah.
When we have elementary classrooms that have 22 kids in them, 23 kids in them, and we're looking to place their families in other schools, that's a real enrollment logistical issue. And if you go physically look at the classrooms, you can't put more desks in them.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be a capacity.
Yeah, so we also have, fire coded capacity of different buildings. But it's one thing to say, a good teacher will say, I'll take them on, but if they physically can't add a desk, or do centers for learning in their classroom, it's not an option. But yeah, we're very much on the hook. And, I don't know if 287 Main is the perfect thing, but the building's in good shape. I don't think it would take a ton to reduce some things there, and I'm hopeful that you all will come over and look at it now that it's had a chance to be brushed up a little bit. But if it's not 287 Main, we have to be having some kind of contingency for what might it be, so that's why we continue to have those conversations with the city leadership as well.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Najin?
Sorry, I just had to bring this up because I was thinking about the busing and the redistricting that you mentioned. And so when we're looking at redistricting and then possibly even having the specialized schools where we're talking about like 2 grades, right, 2 or 3 grades, I think one of the challenges that we've seen since COVID and currently, my personal opinion is the school system is one of the drivers of economic focus within the community. It's very difficult when a bus isn't running for parents to find out that day, right? It is a mess for people who have to go to work, as well as the fact that it's not good for the kids to be in a situation where maybe they're not actually getting to school that day, right? And so when we're looking at these models, I think we should also be considering what it costs to actually stand up a bus system. And I know that that is a ridiculous cost, but I would also say this. If we run short on LPS bus drivers and we have public works employees that can drive bus, or police officers or people at City Hall, at the end of the day, I think supporting the school system is in the interest of the entire municipality. And so I just want to put that out there. If we have employees that we can lean on from other departments as opposed to a contracted third party who, at the end of the day, if they don't show up, it's no skin off of off of their backs. So just wanted to put that out there. That should be factored in when we're looking at the redistricting costs and also the cost of whatever the contract is that comes out. So.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions from the council? Superintendent Langley's, your team, school committee, thank you very much. Your efforts are very much appreciated, and we look forward to seeing you back here again. I will remind all the folks out there in TV land that May 13th is the magic day. Please, please go out and vote. We would very much like to see more than a 5 to 8% turnout.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not tonight. There being any other business before, Director Roy?
Just a reminder, on Thursday night, we'll be going over the utilities LCIP, along with all the fund balance projects that are listed, to see if you want to fund them or not fund them.
Thank you, Director Roy, and that reminds me, please, councilors, get your questions for individual budget items on the municipal side into Director Roy. And as I said in my email, if you could copy all of us, it may spur other thoughts from each of us. So get those questions in, and then we can schedule the departments here to be efficiently here, rather than having all of our staff waiting each night. 5 more meetings. The end is in sight, folks. We can see it. I think that's it for this workshop. Good night, Lewiston, and thank you very much.